Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Testing Peers podcast. My name is Chris Armstrong, and today I'm joined by David Maynard.
Hello.
Sanne Visser
Hello.
Vernon Richards.
Greetings.
Of the Vernon Richards Show. And tonight we're going to be speaking about emotional intelligence. So, Vernon, please bring forth your banter.
So what's your favorite hot drink?
All right, so I'll start us off. I'm holding it right now. It's a beer mug sized cup of English tea with milk and sugar. And I've had a lot of comments by people thinking this was coffee and then thinking I'm chugging down half a liter of coffee in the morning because it looks about the same consistency in terms of how brown it is. That's my absolute favorite. And probably make 3 or 4 of these huge mugs a day.
Brilliant.
David.
For me, it's probably a really nice latte. I do love, if it's made well, creamy, the milk's the right frothiness. I'm trying to do it myself with my own coffee machine. I haven't quite got it right. I'm getting there, but yeah, a nice latte is really lovely.
So what's missing right now from your homemade ones?
I think,
doesn't it?
I don't know that I'm grinding it. I think there are 2 things. I don't think I'm grinding it enough in order to get the right consistency of the coffee, but I think the milk's there. I think we've got the milk. It's just the coffee is not quite ground and expressed enough.
Okay, Christopher, what about you? What's your favourite hot drink?
It's very subjective, Vernon, because
Does it depend on the context?
it depends on the context, the time of year, how I'm feeling. In the morning, I'm drawn greatly to a strong black coffee. I've got a stein that I like to fill a couple of times in the morning, and that normally helps me get through the day with my... Only a couple of times I'll get rather unwell. That is a nice stein that Vernon is showing us all, listener. Mine's from a 1992 beer festival in Bingham, if you're really interested in those sorts of things. If I'm feeling a bit under the weather, I might well be inclined to have something very similar to what Sun is talking about, a sweet tea. But I also quite like, and I had a bit of an ongoing thing with Gita on Twitter about a good hot chocolate with marshmallows in the right environment. Or if I'm feeling particularly festive, a wintry time and I want to have a nice drink, that's good. And if I'm at a Christmas festival or a German Christmas market, I do like a Glühwein. Just hot drinks are great, aren't they? What about you, Vernon?
I love you're as context driven in your drinks as you are in your testing. That's
Well, I threw a bit of a head fake there because I don't like hot drinks. My favourite hot drink is nothing. I absolutely hate hot drinks. I don't understand the logic of pouring boiling hot liquid down your throat. I don't know, man. I really, really dislike the smell and taste of coffee. I just don't. I do not get why people are so excited about coffee. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. Tea, on the other hand, sometimes I smell someone will make some herbal tea and it'll be quite fruity. I've got a sweet tooth and I'll smell this fruity scent aroma in there. I'm like, oh, that smells amazing. And say, is this herbal tea? I'm like, okay, I'll try it, and it's always terrible.
honestly, that's the disconnect of herbal teas for me too. The smell not matching up with the taste. Like that is horrible.
And usually they
Yeah.
have something like fennel in,
It's-
which just
Mm.
revolting.
Or anise, yeah.
Revolting. Yeah. So yeah, I just room temperature is the warmest I'll go with a drink.
So what drink would you go for? What's your go-to drink then? It's not hot.
Anything that is sugary and fizzy. So absolutely the wrong kind of drink that I should be drinking right now. My favorite drink that I can probably get in the UK is called Bigger, and Bigger is spelled with an A, not an ER. It's a drink from the Caribbean, and the flavor I like is fruit punch flavor, so it's pink. So all the artificial colorings and flavorings, and tons of sugar, and lots of CO2 fizziness
Nice.
in there as well, just to make it extra unhealthy. But it tastes like ambrosia.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So today we're going to be talking about emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence is an important factor, I think, in all our lives. And we're going to discuss it in the context of the difference between sort of technical intelligence in terms of our jobs, but also what it means for us and how we cope with emotional intelligence, either in ourselves or in others. I wondered if someone wanted to give their definition of what they understood to be emotional intelligence, or they could read it as story time with Chris from a well-known
Well,
website.
Sana and I have been referencing the same place. There's a little known website, you might have heard of it, called Wikipedia. I picked up a bit on that, and it's the capability of individuals to recognize their own emotions and those of others, discern between different feelings and label them appropriately. Do you know, I think that's really hard if you're like me, but it's quite easy to be quite self-involved and be thinking about yourself a lot and maybe not even processing how you're feeling and acting around other people. But what's helped me is talking about those things with my children as they're going through things, and that helps sort of process and actually begin to articulate thoughts, words, deeds, reactions, read other places.
Yeah, I think kids help. I know as a line manager, there have been times when I've got things totally wrong. I've said the wrong thing in the wrong way at the wrong time to particular people. And that's caused some anxiety, both on my part and their part. But I've learned from it and recognized that actually it's much more important to, in certain situations, really think about the message and how you're going to do it. And it's also in terms of actually giving presentations. We mentioned presentations quite a few times, but having the emotional intelligence of gearing your message to the people that you're giving it to. You know, if you are if they are giving more technical, then give more technical content. If you're talking to C-suite, then they don't really want the technical content. They want to know, find out what the metrics they want and give that sort of detailed. Basically, I think one of the biggest things for emotional intelligence is one size does not fit all. It isn't just one way or my way or the by way or whatever. You need to fit the message to the people you are giving the message to and have empathy that they may react in a different way to how you're expecting because of the way that you're saying it and the words that you're using. And as I said, the time of day that you're actually giving it.
I think that's really useful. And to build on top of that, I think it's part of that awareness of emotional reactions or being able to label them, but also to be able to engender that emotion in a presentation that comes from, I think, a high EQ place, because it's the empathy side playing into a presentation even more, not just being aware of the audience, but also what emotional message do I want to be in this talk and people to walk away with. That's another aspect, I think, of being aware of emotions and labeling them, is to also sort of put them in the right place to engender a certain reaction. I think that's part of it.
We've talked a lot about your audience, but you've also got to be comfortable in what your message is as well, right? You know, emotional intelligence isn't saying what people want to hear in a way that they want to hear it. Sometimes we have to deliver things that people don't want to hear, but there's ways and means to do that, and a lot of that is being aware of how different folks process different kinds of information, but how to still get across your message. Often when we present things, present information, talk to people, there's a reason that we're doing those things. There is a motivation behind that. But, you know, I know that speaking to one child will require a different conversation in order to achieve the same goal as speaking to the other child. They don't have the same motivators, but I still need to know that I want to get that thing done by them. And the interesting thing in that situation is a sense of equality amongst the audience that comes across, and a sense of fairness. because we do all attribute different measures to what is the right sort of measure, whether that's a time measure, maybe it's pay. It could be how things are lauded, how things are publicly dealt with.
I want to pick out one point in your little talk there, because I think that I would self-identify as having high EQ, and that audience reaction, or to put it more broadly, feedback, is also one of the things I hate most and have had to learn the most about giving and dealing with, because I'm very aware of the emotional response it gets from me, it gets from the people I'm talking to, mentoring, or giving a presentation to. So that feedback, seeing it reflected in an audience and getting a certain emotion back, be it the simplest boredom or disgust or anything else, that has been one of the hardest things to deal with, because I can generally pick it up and I'll realize that that has happened, that somebody has taken the feedback and has been crushed by it. And there's no hiding it generally if I'm in the room. And that has been one of the most difficult things to learn to deal with. Like, if there's a downside to high IQ, that would be one of the big ones.
What about predicting those things? You kind of already know what they're going to say, but you still have to go through with it.
You have to learn to do it, I guess, but there is no part of me that will ever be completely comfortable when things are that volatile. And even now in audience members, when giving presentations in large rooms, you can still pick out pockets of people that are reacting negatively or are not as engaged or are in some way not pleased by a message. It's still triggering to this day. It's less so, I've gotten used to it, but it's still a big part of what I don't like about being able to sense that in other people.
I found an interesting definition of emotional intelligence on the Mental Health America website. So mhanational.org. It says emotional intelligence is the ability to manage both your own emotions and understand the emotions of people around you. And there are 5 key elements to EI: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. Are any of those 5 things of a surprise, or are they pretty much what you expect? Are you stronger in some than others, or are you pretty much ticks across the board? So it was self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills.
There's a big part of me that wants to say yes to the self-regulation, and then that be immediately like a counterbalance to self-awareness, because the more you self-regulate, the less aware you are of what you are feeling. So the more you're regulating, the less you're aware of what's going on. Like it's kind of a seesaw, those two, I think. And the more aware you are of an emotion, the less you're probably able to regulate it. To give an obvious example, just immediate wild anger when completely, you've blown your top. In that moment, you're very self-aware. I would say you're more in your body than at any other time, and you know your feelings. But also the ability to then regulate is pretty much non-existent for most of us. So that's a seesaw to me, interestingly. And I think that's a bit of a contradiction to put both in that sort of emotional intelligence.
What about everyone else?
I think that social skills is an interesting one because actually, although you've got emotional intelligence and you may have empathy, you may be an introvert and so therefore naturally not necessarily feel that you have a lot of social skills. So although you're emotionally intelligent, you may not, the social skills are I think it's an interesting one because I think you can have all the other 4 without necessarily needing to have that as a key factor in emotional intelligence.
It's almost like they're implying that high emotional intelligence will then imply high social skills. And I think there's a correlation in that, whereas if you're picking up on what people are feeling, generally you'll have that empathetic response as an introvert or an extrovert. So maybe you'll have more opportunity to have the social skills exercised.
Yeah.
Because people will like being around you.
Yeah, they might like being around you, but you may not necessarily, if you're an introvert, you may not recognize it in yourself that you're good at social skills. I think that's
True.
interesting.
That too.
Social skills don't mean extrovert, obviously. It's about the context, though. You could put me and you in a room and we could be like socially really great and bouncing off each other and read those things. And then you just change one person in that dynamic and it's different. That person doesn't read the same signals, doesn't infer the same things that you're saying. Some of those unspoken things that you just are just a given suddenly aren't. Social skills isn't just a case of you get on with everyone. It's about communicating and it's about listening, which is part of communicating, but we often have to sort of add that in because it becomes so much about the projection rather than the audible ingestion. And I think I wrote a talk on the 5 love languages about communication specifically and how even people who identify as one of those particular love languages, they're going to be very different people. They're going to perceive those things. I guess the intelligence often that I would perceive, it comes down to a core tester attribute of curiosity. You've got to find out how things react when you do them. You've got to uncover information about certain things. And then in the face of that information and that evidence, you then act and work further along those lines. It's not the case of some book says this is the way to be emotionally intelligent. It's good to have guides, it's good to have heuristics, but everything and everybody is different. The dynamic of this group of 4 people will be different than if we had one different person in the group. Our teams, our agile scrum teams, all those things, it is just
Yeah, but I'm gonna challenge you a little bit there, because
go on.
if what you're describing is uncoverable and find outable, and you can sort of figuring it out by being a good detective and having all this curiosity, why do we have so many of these stories of the unempathetic manager that just shows no regard for how you're feeling? And that is rife across the board. Like it's almost a cultural meme.
There's a motivation element here as well. There's a motivation bit that's being time poor. Often people don't have enough time or priority to drive forward with those things. And let's face it, we've all sometimes got to the point where we haven't got enough mental bandwidth to do anything, but we're happy to find our way that does the thing and just do that.
Yeah, I agree. Just there's still people I felt like I have moved mountains and not found a way to connect to who they are, and just not being able to find that even sympathy, not even empathy within them, while having searched many times over many conversations. Like I get the bandwidth thing, totally agree. But there's still, I think, there is emotional intelligence variance, and there is an unskilled group that has a long way to go.
There's a compatibility issue that will persist always. And I think you could put the greatest coaches in some of the most difficult teams and they wouldn't work. And sometimes stuff that you would never consider doing might work. The world is full of many, many different individuals and social situations and scenarios that we could never begin to be able to work out ways and means. But part of that investigation that I was talking about is about uncovering whether or not you can or not.
I think the emotional intelligence seems to be around, recognizing your own emotions and recognizing the emotions of other people. Sana got me thinking, like if the person or people that you're interacting with have no interest in understanding you, it doesn't matter how you deploy your emotional intelligence, really, a great deal, except maybe to just manage your own emotions. It's not going to help you interact with somebody who doesn't want to play. But at least you can recognize that's what's going on, perhaps. I don't know. But
Which again, to Chris's point, like in context, and Vernon, I would agree with you. Like if we were all as clued in to people's emotions and intelligent in that way, you would lose the diversity that we obviously need and want in the workplace. Because I think there is a good point to not being as sensitive to what other people are feeling. Because honestly, if you want to be, for instance, rebellious or go your own way, then it is an advantage actually not to have those sensors that clue you into what other people are feeling, because it would get in the way of you striking down that path. So that variance, I think, is naturally there. I just feel more and more it's become obvious that it is something that is trainable to a degree, and we still haven't quite figured out how to get it to the levels we should have, especially for people that are mentoring or coaching or leading others. And that's where I really struggle with these emotional intelligence being so valued. It's because they're concerned that it's lacking at these levels of management, at these coach levels. And that's where a lot of these articles came out of. Like, why are we talking so much about emotional intelligence? It's because we think it's not there in a lot of organizations and bureaucracies and places where it should be.
I would agree to a certain extent, Vernon, about what you said. But just because they're not playing the game doesn't mean to say that someone else can't affect their emotions. There are some people that are quite unemotional. Well, they give the perception of being unemotional. Some people may hide their emotions so much in the public view and actually only feel their emotions in private. And people with emotional intelligence should have, again, an awareness of how they portray themselves so that they don't affect other people adversely and therefore create as a different effect than they tried to do. So it may not necessarily be them playing ball, but actually for an emotional intelligent person, they can control the narrative because they can control their own emotions and possibly those around them.
I don't know. I don't think it's about controlling the emotions of others. I think that would be quite difficult. Unless you're a hypnotist, maybe. I don't know.
But you can, the way that you say something can directly affect what someone's feeling.
Yeah, it kind of it depends on where you draw that. For me, anyway, it depends on where you draw that line, right? So you can say something to me, and I can react or I can respond, and the reaction feels a little bit more instinctual, and the response seems a little bit more considered and deliberate. So you could use your awareness of people's emotions or hot buttons or things that trigger them, or excite them, or energize them, or de-energize, or whatever. You could certainly use that for whatever purposes, but if somebody wanted to stop you from controlling their emotions, they could do it very easily. I guess that's what I mean.
I'm smirking at you, Vernon, because again, self-identifying as someone that is good at this. If I get angry and I really want to make you feel bad, and this has happened, I'm very nasty and good at doing that. I'm not proud of that necessarily, but it has happened in the past that indeed I will say the exact thing that I know you can't handle and will make you angry. And I can do that very purposefully. And that's part of that emotional intelligence. Like I can pretty much figure out people's hot buttons and vulnerabilities fairly quickly and push on them. And it's a superpower when it's used to coach, when it's used to engender some growth and somebody's ready and I get their permission for it. But when I'm angry, boy, oh boy, it's also not nice. So there is the dark side to it as well. And you're saying you can switch that off? I've generally found people are not that aware of when those buttons are pushed and then be like, oh, you're manipulating my emotions. I'm stopping you there. Like I haven't seen that as much.
Yeah, I have. I think it depends on the experiences that you've had, you see. So
Yeah.
if it becomes clear that somebody is literally just trying to push your buttons, for me anyway, it just depowers.
But even shutting down it is an emotional reaction. Like
I'm not
powering
no,
down.
I'm not. It's not. I'm not talking about powering down. I'm talking about, oh, you are actually trying to push my buttons. Now you just look like a clown. Like it's not.
Yeah.
It's just. It just wouldn't work at that point. It's like, oh, is that what you're trying? Okay, fine, whatever.
I would say that's high EQ. I would say that is high emotional intelligence. You knowing that and having gotten to the point where you've seen it, you've recognized it, and you're able to intelligently deal with that manipulation of your emotions. I would say that is, again, demonstrating this high EQ because that is like, okay, I see what you're doing there. I recognize the way you're playing on my emotions, and I'm choosing to regulate, to go back to those words. I'm aware and now I'm regulating, and I will then not respond to those pushes from the other person emotionally. I would argue that is high EQ.
I've been in situations where if you were trying to push my buttons and I just didn't care, I think that's what I'm talking about. I'm like, I don't care. Like, you are irrelevant to me. It doesn't matter it doesn't matter whether you're trying to make me happy, you're trying to make me sad. It's just you are an irrelevant person to me. And I think in those situations, that could be high emotional intelligence. I've certainly been in conversations with people who I know are trying to push my buttons, and they're not necessarily top of my Christmas card list, let's put it that way. And I'm just like, well, it doesn't matter. You're just an irrelevant.
It doesn't matter what you say. Yeah.
Yeah, why are we even having this conversation? We shouldn't even be talking. I don't like you. So like, I'm gonna go over here and stay away from you. And you can do whatever you want over here. It's fine.
Yeah, I'm going to continue to push your buttons now because if that's you and you are now my manager, because this is the situation where I'm arguing this is why something's lacking in organizations and why we have so many articles from HBR, from mental health about emotional intelligence. Because if that's you and you're having that reaction, you're across the table from me and you're my manager, now it's become a different game. And that I think happens way too often. And that's why we have this emphasis on emotional intelligence, because if that happens in the workplace at a time where somebody is trying to push your buttons, there's reasons behind that. And there should be some type of exploration. Again, now we're going to Chris's point, curiosity about what's happening on that side. Like, why are you doing this? Like, it's rolling off my back, and that's great. I think that's good, especially as a coach, Vernon. But the curiosity to then be like, okay, but why are you pushing those buttons? And having indeed the emotional intelligence to go like, okay, let's get curious about this. Then you come into a situation where you have a manager or a coach or a mentor that is responding in a very intelligent way to what they're being fed emotionally.
Mm.
And I realize I'm pushing the boundary a bit now. I'm wondering how you're going to react.
No, not really. It's just pretty interesting. It just feels like a more dynamic kind of situation that you're describing. What I can imagine is somebody is able to self-regulate and they will be aware and their motivations will be in flux. And sometimes they won't be able to self-regulate. And sometimes they won't be aware. In the course of a single conversation, I bet that probably happens.
Yeah, I think it does. Yeah.
Yeah, if overall you feel like the person across the table from you doesn't have your best interests at heart, that's one thing. And if you do feel like they've got your best interests at heart, that's another thing. I find I have different conversations with people depending on how much I believe I think the thing I struggle with the most is probably self-regulation, I think. Like not letting myself see certain behaviors and then start attributing some meaning to those. Oh, this person doesn't like me, or this is making me really angry and I can't like contain it, or I'm feeling a little bit frustrated and I can't figure out how to turn that around. I feel like I'm constantly aware of how I feel though, like all the time.
Hmm.
And the social skills and the interpersonal skills, I don't know why I've always felt okay with that aspect of. I mean, I wouldn't have called it that from when I was a kid, but I've just always been able to get along with people like forever. I have theories about that, but they're just theories. I haven't. It's not. Emotional intelligence is a very interesting topic. I haven't dove into it to any great degree, so it's pretty interesting. It sounds like you have, Sana, so it's pretty interesting hearing what he's saying.
It's a huge part of one of my favorite hobbies, which of course is the philosophy of stoicism. And emotional regulation is a massive part of that, where you're taught that the
Yeah.
external trigger just is, and your
Huh.
emotion is on you. And
Hmm.
the emotional regulation part of it is like the best thing you can do as a stoic is to work on that in order to become more moderate in your emotional reactions. That's the whole idea behind that philosophy. So that's where that exploration and a lot of the philosophy behind sort of what is an emotional trigger. You said it just now. You made me angry. Well, no, you did,
Exactly.
not the situation. The situation just was. The
Yeah.
Wi-Fi wasn't connecting or whatever, or the mic wasn't working, or, for the
Yep.
millionth time, it picked up the wrong camera when you joined your Zoom call. That just happened. Your irritation with the situation, that's what you brought to the table. And very
Mm.
often it's misinterpreted into this very cold, like, you should let nothing affect you. I am a rock. I am an island. But what it actually is about is no, these things happen and they will affect you. And that's what they say constantly in Stoicism. You will be affected. It may not be this thing, it may be something else, but something will be your trigger. And premeditating on that and exercising with that and practicing with it helps you regulate. And that's what the whole philosophy is about. So that's why I think I'm going overboard right now because it's such a hobby of mine.
It's a good one though, and what you've actually modeled here is talking about things. We haven't gone out with an explicit way of let's model communication, but we've given space to talking about various different things about where we feel different scenarios and things. And when I've had real life things happen where I've experienced real life emotions about things, one of the most helpful things that I have had is to talk about them with people that I trust and I know. And that helps me reflect. It helps me
Mm.
understand better what is the thing that made me feel that way? Why am I in that place? Why am I reacting in this particular way? And that learning those behaviors about myself, which only comes because I am now talking with other people, because my own internal echo chamber is like a spiral. But externalizing that and speaking with other people allows me to be able to work out what my triggers are, what sort of things are happening that lead me down those particular paths, so that I can in the future deal with those things differently. And
Yeah.
only by talking about those things, suddenly it becomes audible, it's left my body, and even if I'm the only one that's talking, because whoever I've been talking to, and some of you people I do that with, have been great active listeners and almost just played things back to me, that has helped me to form a better picture of what I think I'm experiencing, how I am those ways, and what my emotions mean And maybe I call it sometimes it's a sanity check. Am I actually crazy for doing these things?
You're almost describing what it means to have a growth mentality around emotional intelligence. I think you're almost perfectly describing that it is a process, it is continuous, and it involves reflection and growth. And whether that is, like you're saying, by talking through others or becoming better at self-regulation that Vernon mentioned, both are valid in this growth towards better emotional intelligence. But it's that growth mindset that is, it's not, this is who I am, it's this is how I can still change, move forward, think things through, regulate, maybe work on some of those social skills. I think that's what it's about. And you just summed that up very nicely, actually.
Chris, you can drop the mic now. Perfect. Well, we've run out of time for this. I'm sure we have plenty more in the can, and I'm sure we'll revisit this topic again, because I think it's been a really interesting topic. And thank you so much, Sanne and Vernon and Chris, for joining us on the podcast tonight. Please do reach out to us. Please email us at contactus@testingpeers.com. You can also contact us through LinkedIn or some of the other social media channels. Please do remember that we do have the Testing Peers Conference. Look out for the tickets. Do have a search for the Testing Peers Conference or peerscon.com, and you can purchase tickets, which will be held in March next year in Nottingham in the UK. Next year is 2025, by the way, if you're listening to this in the future. So thank you very much again for everyone. Thank you for listening, and we'll invite you back next time.
For now, it's goodbye from the Testing Peers.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.